Hello, everybody. This is Mike Fisher from the Orleans Niagara BOCES Race to the Top network team. I am one of the network team specialists with my colleague Carol Bush, and today we're going to talk about the Library and Media Specialist (SLOs) and some of the questions that have come up. Joining me today is Lindsay Webb, one of our other colleagues. I'm going to let her tell you about what she does. Lindsay?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Delaney Webb. I am the School Library System Director at Orleans Niagara BOCES, and hopefully we'll get some of those most pressing questions answered today about SLOs. Some of our local librarians were under the impression that they did not need an SLO. Can you explain what the rules are?
Okay, absolutely. One of the things that we need to look at is what is actually in the guidance document. And the guidance document, there's tons and tons of rules in it. And I think the best thing to do would be just to pull it up and just let everybody see what it looks like. When we put this on the web, there'll actually be a link to this document right underneath the video so that you can have access to the same documents that we're going to be discussing here. But what I'm looking in here is the APPR guidance document that was updated on August the 13th, 2012, and it's 109 pages. But we only need to deal with one very small section of it. And I'm going to be going to section B very quickly here and looking specifically at section B12. B12 concerns librarians, and it says, when must school librarians be evaluated under Education Law 3012C? I'm reading some of this, I'm going to paraphrase it, but only classroom teachers and building principals are to be evaluated under Education Law 3012-C. A classroom teacher is defined as a teacher in the classroom teaching service who is a teacher of record. Because librarians, some librarians actually teach classes and some librarians have like open libraries. So it depends on whether or not they are the teacher of record, that they have kids assigned to them, whether or not they'll have to do the SLO. So a certified librarian who is not a teacher of record is not considered a classroom teacher under 3012C, and therefore would not have to be evaluated under Education Law 3012C. That means that they would just be evaluated the way that they always have. And they wouldn't be subject to the 2020-60 plan that other teachers who are teachers of record will be subject to. So does that make sense?
Yeah. So some librarians won't need them, but other librarians, depending on whether or not they're the teacher of record, will. Is that correct?
Right. And that teacher of record really comes down to what's in their system for like student management, like if it's eSchool or Power School, whatever it is that the school district is using, they have to be in the system with those students assigned to them. If it's an open library system, but the kids like are brought to the library and the teacher leaves, and then the librarian or the media specialist is with them the entire time, and they have it in the system that those kids are assigned to that teacher at a particular time, then we would have a situation where there would be an SLO that needed to be written. If they're not in the system that way,
if they issue the grade, they need an SLO.
Say that again.
If they issue a grade, they need an SLO.
Right, because they're assigned to that teacher like they would be assigned to art or music or PE, and library would be like another pull-out type situation. And we've got both in our component districts that we've got some teachers that are, or some librarians that are actively teaching students and are giving them a grade. Others have open library. If they have the open library and they're not the teacher of record, then they do not need an SLO and they'll be evaluated the way that they always have been. Okay?
If a librarian does need one, what does a media specialist SLO look like?
It could look several different ways. The ones that I've got to show you are examples of like activities that may not represent a complete year's worth of learning, but might represent more of like a big research project where they would be sharing some of the responsibilities with a classroom teacher, or do search strategies or information literacy, things like that, whatever is coming up in the scope of whatever the teacher is doing in their class. But I think it'd be easier if I just showed you a couple of examples. I'm going to start with one for fourth grade. And I'd like to point out there are several SLO components that Every SLO has to have, including whether it's library, media, math, global, whatever, they all have to have the same 8 elements. And that includes population, which is the students assigned to the course, learning content, which in general includes the Common Core standards and then any New York State standards that are outside of ELA or math, the interval of instructional time, how long the kids are with a particular teacher, the evidence, what is the pre-assessment and the post-assessment. The other parts of this include a baseline, that's the beginning assessment moment and where the kids are starting, and how that informs instruction over the course of the year. A target that a teacher would set, how they want their students to grow or where they want them to grow to over the course of the year. The Heady Scoring is the scoring bands that are set first by the state, 0 through 20, to determine whether or not you're ineffective, developing, effective, or highly effective. And then the scoring intervals, which are represented here as percentages, which are largely set by districts and sometimes by individual schools, depending on what was negotiated in their districts. The last element of the SLO is the rationale, and that just based on what happened in the baseline assessment or the pre-assessment, and the standards that you're responsible for, what is it that you're looking for to drive instruction toward? Why are you doing what you're doing, basically? So if we look at this particular SLO, this one is for library media 4th grade, excuse me, and the population here includes all 4th grade students, heterogeneously grouped, approximately 20 students per class. The learning content is the 4th grade ELA, and they also included AASL standards for the 21st century learner, which includes find, evaluate, and select appropriate sources to answer questions, demonstrate confidence and self-direction by making independent choices in the selection of resources and information, and then monitor their own information seeking. These also directly align to the Common Core standards. The Common Core standards, there's an umbrella document in the standards called the College and Career Readiness Capacities. And the College and Career Readiness Capacities ask that the students value evidence and be critical thinkers, and to strategically and capably use media. So all of the AASL standards for the 21st century learner are kind of up underneath that umbrella of the college and career readiness capacities. And all of the standards that are in the college and career, that are in the Common Core standards relate back to those college and career readiness capacities. So this one fits in several places within the Common Core. Excuse me. The interval of instructional time here is the full school year from 2012 to 2013. Some districts are asking that like months and year be put on, so it might be October 2012 to May 2013. Just do whatever your district asks you to do, whatever is their district decision. Now, if we look at the evidence that's here, the baseline assessment is that students will locate and provide answers to 10 specific research questions, and there's an attachment here of those questions, as well as the print or non-print source that's used. The score is calculated using the assessment rubric, which is also attached to this. The summative assessment is the same thing. There's going to be 10 more specific research questions, which are attached as Appendix B. And then there's a summative assessment rubric, which is the exact same rubric as for the baseline. Because there's a rubric, we can set a target based on a certain number of points from the rubric, or moving from one place on the rubric to another place on the rubric. And while I'm not going to go through all of the attachments here, this document will be available underneath the video on the web page when we put this video up for everyone to view. So based on the baseline assessment of what the kids can already do with locating, navigating, and using and evaluating both print and non-print resources, they'll be scored against the rubric. And then over the course of the year, they'll be taught how to do this better than they did on the pre-assessment. And then they'll be given this task again, scored on the rubric, and we'll be looking for students who have scored at least 36 points on the summative assessment. Okay, 36 points based on the rubric, not out of 100%. So the teacher that does that, if 85 to 100% of the students achieve a score of at least 36 points, then they're going to be here in this highly effective range. If between 58 and 84 students score at least 36 points, then they're going to be in the effective range. So the rationale here that this particular teacher wrote is about the learning content is based on the most relevant Common Core learning standards and the AASL standards for the 21st century learner. We assume students have had a prior introduction to basic information literacy skills, and in the absence of standardized test data, we'll use the baseline assessment to determine students' specific levels of information literacy skills and knowledge of library print and non-print sources. The summative assessment will determine any improvement in students' ability to locate, navigate, use, and evaluate appropriate print and non-print sources, and the summative score is calculated using the summative assessment rubric. Now, in this one, there are a lot of attachments as far as what the research questions are going to be, what the rubric is. Let's scroll down to that. I'll let you read through all of this when you download the document yourself, but this is an example of what a library media specialist SLO could look like. And by the way, I'd like to say that these are courtesy of the Onondaga Cortland Madison BOCES. OCM BOCES has put tons of examples of SLOs up, including this library media SLO and another one that is for secondary. And so I'd like to walk through this one real quick and then answer any other questions that you have. Any questions so far about the 4th grade one?
So far, so good.
Okay, let's jump right into the secondary one then. This one also includes all 8 elements of what the state is asking for there to be on an SLO. The population is here. The learning content is specific to 3 Common Core learning standards. Let me make this just a little bigger, which include a language standard. I know that because the letter L is there, and that's the coding for language. RI is the coding for reading for informational text. And then a college and career readiness capacity is, a college and career reading anchor standard is here for gathering relevant information from multiple print and digital resources. There are also AASL standards here for respecting copyright and intellectual property rights, following ethical and legal guidelines, and using information and technology ethically and responsibly, which all 3 of those relate back to things that the college and career readiness capacities are asking of students. This one also has an interval of the full 2012-2013 school year. And what changes here is the evidence. The baseline that's here is the 8th grade English research paper that's based on a district-wide rubric. Additionally, an on-demand assessment was given at the beginning of the year based on a district-wide developed rubric. And then the summative moment will be the 9th grade English research papers based on the district-wide rubric. So they're using that rubric to assess both moments. And their baseline is the 8th grade research project. It says that 40% of students accurately and ethically accessed and utilized information sources according to the rubric. And then the pre-assessment indicated that 35% of students accurately applied style guidelines. So they're going to want to grow from that moment. Their growth target here is that 80% of 9th grade students will accurately apply formal style guidelines, and 80% of 9th grade students will accurately and ethically access and utilize information sources. The 2 scores will be averaged and applied to the scale, according to the rubric. So the Heady criteria here, if the teacher hits that 80%, then that's going to give them 13 points. If you'll look where the scoring interval is, 79 to 81%, they set this one at 13 points. So if they hit their target, they're going to get 13 points. Anything above that just puts them higher in the effective range. Anything that's 95% or above puts them in the highly effective range. They've written a rationale here for this one that includes what the learning content is based on and what they've seen in terms of past efforts with this particular project about students citing information gathered from print and non-print resources and used for English research. So this one is just a couple of pages long. There are no attachments to it, but this one is set to a project, whereas the other one, the 4th grade one, was set to like a full year of learning, like informational research strategies. So a couple of different ways to set an SLO, and certainly district decisions play into this, but I wanted to make sure that we showed a couple of different examples at a couple of different grade levels so that teachers could see how this works if they do in fact need an SLO.
Okay. Are there any other ways to measure growth for a media specialist that doesn't write an SLO?
Well, there's another way that they can set an SLO, whether it's part of their like growth or not. Depending on how they were previously evaluated, they could use an SLO as part of their evaluation system, even if they're not subject to the rules of 3012C. Or if they're having trouble setting an SLO because what they do in the library doesn't lend itself very easily to a pre and a post assessment moment that's going to prioritize standards the way that core teachers would have to do that. You can actually set a group or a team SLO to an entire school's ELA scores. So I want to show you what that looks like, but I do want to say that that would involve a lot of trust. And it would involve an agreement with the teachers that that would be something that they would be on board for doing. And so the caveat would be you have to have a conversation about whether or not that'd be a good idea for you. Okay? So let me show you what that looks like. And this is straight from a state presentation that we had in Albany several months ago. And this was the example that they gave for setting an SLO to group or team results. So you'll notice that all the elements are here: the population, learning content, evidence, baseline, target, Heady criteria, rationale. All of those elements are still in this particular SLO. When you set it to a group or team result, it's going to be all the kids that are in your school. So this one is a middle school sample, and so it's going to include all the students in grades 6, 7, and 8. The learning content is going to be all of the Common Core standards for ELA and literacy for grades 6, 7, and 8. And the evidence is going to be the New York State ELA assessment for grades 6, 7, and 8. The baseline information here is about the students' performance on last year's ELA. And it showed school proficiency rates of 56, 60%, and 62% for grades 5, 6, and 7 respectively. And it also says that grade 5 proficiency rates were calculated based on an average of the feeder schools. So there may have been 3 or 4 different schools that contributed to that, and altogether they were at 56%. If we move to the next page of the SLO, this is where we're going to look at the targets and the Heady criteria. The target here is for the average growth in ELA proficiency for students in grades 6, 7, and 8 to increase by 5%. So if we look at the Heady scoring bands down here, 5% is at 11 points. So it's not at the bottom of the effective range, but it's less than half of that midpoint for the effective range. So in order for a teacher to get highly effective here, the average growth would have to be 6.5% or higher. Let's go to the last page here. This one says that the interval will be September 4th, 2012 through April 19th, 2013, which is a month and year versus the other ones that were just, the full school year. So this one has it a little more specific. The rationale here is that the students enrolled in the arts courses, and we're using, this was an arts example that the state gave us, but we're using it for library media. The students that are enrolled at this middle school were engaged in literacy-infused instruction, as they would with a library media specialist, and be exposed to ELA standards through the library. The evidence of the state assessment is directly tied to the students' ongoing work and learning in library and media by way of assessing ELA skills taught in while they're with the librarian. The targets are rigorous, as our school ELA performance usually only climbs 1 or 2 percentage points a year, and students will read, actually for this one, the rationale might include something about how they access different types of media, how they cite resources that they use, all of those which relate back to the college and career readiness capacities, reading for informational text, language development, and any of the AASL standards that a librarian or media specialist might use. The only thing that I want to say about this one, though, is in the rationale, and this is a state example, and they're not perfect, but this is a district decision that may need to be made, or at least have a conversation about, because part of the rationale here says that the targets are rigorous as our school ELA performance usually only climbs 1 or 2 percentage points a year. If I go back to the previous slide, if historical results are saying that growth is only 1 or 2%, 5% might be a little bit too rigorous for a target. Because if it happens again the exact same way that it's happened in years past, and the most you grow is 2%, 2% is down here in the ineffective range, and we don't want to set teachers up for failure if they're doing a group SLO. So while we can set a rigorous goal, for this one, a rigorous goal might be 2.5%. And then 2.5% gets moved up into the effective range. And districts have a decision whether that effective could be 9 points, 13 points, 17 points. A lot of our local districts are setting that high. If you meet your goal, you get, between 15 and 17 points in the effective zone. If you go above your goal, then you're highly effective. But I just wanted to point that out in this particular example because it was one of the things that came up when there's kind of a mismatch between the target, the Heady scoring bands, and the rationale. We want to make sure all of those things match up. And if we're looking at historical data and we know that the kids are only growing 1 or 2%, 5% is probably too lofty a goal. It is rigorous, but you can still be rigorous and set something that's realistic. I don't know if it's showing through like what I'm saying here, but the actual setting of the SLO is easy. It's a SMART goal. It's something that's specific, that's measurable, that's attainable. What is the R? Relevant or realistic, and it's timely. So all of those things are part of the SLO process. But that R one, the realistic part, is really important, especially with the group or team set SLO, because we don't want to say that we're going to have to grow 5% if historically we've only grown 2%. So we want to make sure that what we're doing within the SLO is realistic. And that said, this really is all about the assessments. What does the kid know when they come in with us, and what do they know when they leave? And once you know what your assessments are going to be, actually writing the SLO is a cinch. So any other questions? Or
I just have one other little question.
Okay.
If you don't write an SLO, that doesn't mean a librarian is becoming obsolete, correct?
Oh, no. Actually, one of the things that I'll do is I'll link to a blog post that I wrote last year about library and media specialists. Because of the amount of informational text, language studies, being strategic and capable with media, both print and non-print, I don't think that there's ever been a time where the media specialist was more important. And in the blog post, I write that they're the cornerstone of everything related to literacy. And just because you don't have to do an SLO, all it means is that you would be evaluated the way that you've always been evaluated, and not that you're necessarily obsolete. It's just 2 different evaluation systems based on whether or not you're the teacher of record. But we have to have the library and media specialist, especially now because kids need to be able to access multiple types of media. And where does the media live? I mean, it lives everywhere, but the hub of that in a school is the library. And it's going to remain the library for a long, long time.
Thank you for answering my question.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I hope that other people that are watching this find this helpful. And we're going to be adding a lot of documentation underneath the video here. So look down and click on any of the SLO samples that we shared, the group or team SLO sample. I'll put the blog post in there, and I'll put the APPR guidance document. Section B12 is the section that I was looking at. So thank you, Lindsay, for helping me out today, and I hope this is helpful for all of our library media specialists.